Hello, Premiere 360 Video Collage crew. I have a couple of miscellaneous Premiere 360 video tips that I need to make sure I told you about this week. So, if you have been keeping up, last week we made a Fantasyland Harry Potter Lord of the Rings portal zone out of this old sort of architectural archway ruins. And we pow we used VR plane to sphere and rotate projection, but also rotate source to try to achieve some kind of like geometric oblique angles out into our space. And then blend modes to get them to fit in sort of magically and transparently into this background. And then for giggles, we put a little bit of a magical and probably absurd VR light rays transition into a new space. Now, another tool that I showed you in physical meet face-to-face class, but that you might not have used in a while, and I want to remind you exists, is VR rotate sphere, which sounds a little like plane to sphere, but it does something rather different. If you throw VR rotate sphere on a piece of 360 footage or still image, what it does is allow you to rotate your footage in any of the three axes. Z is probably the weirdest. Whoa. But I could imagine a lot of use for rotating on the pan. This is the most practical, and so I'll talk about it the most in just a second. Rotating on the X, on the tilt, would be pretty weird unless well, two reasons. One is you could stylize. I mean, you could just be like, whoa, gravity's upside down and the ceiling's the floor, dude. So that could be a cool effect. But you could also have intentionally shot, or someone could have intentionally shot, and you're dealing with their footage, something that's upside down. They hung the camera from a tripod from above or something like that. So you can roll footage over this way. And of course, you could, if you really want to have people need a barf bag, you could keyframe any of these too to kind of like turn. But I have to say, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you got to do it super slow and super smooth. And I'd almost say don't do it at all, because I think that the point of the headset, right, is let people do their own panning and tilting with their head. You don't have to do it for them. But let's get back to why I'm talking about this. I've given you a lot of reasons not to use it, but here's the main reason to use it. When people are good 360 editors, just like good classic continuity editors in flat movies, you don't know they were there, but they get you to look in exactly the right place at the moment of the cut. So if for a moment we ditch this light rays thing, because all it's doing is bogging down my computer and looking tacky, we have a hard transition between this ancient space and this more contemporary space. And depending on where is catching your eye, there are likely to be this is sort of like a psychology issue, right? Like, you're likely to be looking at one of these portals at the moment of the cut, just because, like, that's the visual interest, And while some audience members might be looking at the North Pole or South Pole portals, I bet most won't even notice they're there. Or if they do, they won't be staring at them that long. So I would be willing to wager a small portion of my life savings, that we're looking at one of these around here. And I think it's going to be, I honestly think it's going to be the purple one or this one, just because they're the brightest. And this is a little bit of me doing some guesswork, but if you were doing a more narrative piece, you know, where a character moved and they were the one delivering a line, then there's no guesswork in it. You know, you can basically bet, you know, that we're following that protagonist as they're speaking. You know, it's a rare viewer who refuses to watch the lead actor or something like that. So what I'm saying is, I can bet that our audience is looking here or here. Now, at the moment of the cut, where does that leave their eyeball? Is it on anything particularly interesting? Well, our portals stay, in this case, which is maybe an odd example. But if we think about the background, you know, like, is this wall divider or this like distant exhibit information, is that the most interesting thing that could be right there? Probably not, right? So what I want to do is think about how I'm guiding the audience's eye. So now here, given this footage, I think I've landed at something that's potentially more interesting, because this has like Z-space depth, the colors kind of match, and it leads to like there's actually human figures back there. And over here, this sort of fits into this space. I don't know that it's like the most beautiful thing in the world, but I actually can almost believe that it's casting this colored light up here. And I didn't really plan this. I mean, this is pretty off the cuff here. But, you know, these two aligned with the color that's nearby them, I'm liking that. I'm believing it. It also kind of draws my eye to the fact that there are people in this photograph, which could be a plus or could be a minus, but I'm down with it. Plus, it leaves this portal on this bright green, which is sort of an interesting pop, you know. And this one, maybe not the best, but I'm willing to go with it. So this effect of changing the pan 193 degrees on the y-axis, for me, has made a much better edit, right? It looks like this leads somewhere. It goes from ancient doorway to contemporary doorway, and the purple matches, you know? It leads from, you know, ancient doorway with the blue to contemporary exhibit with the blue, and the blue matches. So I'm like, oh, okay, I think we've got something here. You know, I think it's like, it's actually looking like it makes some kind of visual sense now. And just to reiterate, that's only really achievable with a tool like this VR Rotate Sphere, because we didn't shoot this footage. You know, the last time anybody had a chance to say where the quote-unquote front of the camera was, where the center of this composition was on location when they shot the photograph. And so if you're shooting 360 footage, you have a little bit of control over that. But in post, you want to be able to turn this stuff around. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about 360 footage that you don't have with a flat frame. You know, you can punch in on 4K and reframe your composition a little bit, but you can't just like rotate the entire thing around and just decide where the middle is. But with 360, you can. So that's a practical use of VR Rotate Sphere. And then if you want to get into impractical uses, that's when you start being like, oh, we're on the ceiling, can you believe it? But for me, I think this is what I want out of this footage. And then if I liked my transition and I want to remain tacky, I just throw it back on there, and we go to town. Sweet. Like magic.